Four names: Jacob Blake, Reginald Boston, Morris Bohannon, and Norman. One of them you've heard of, Jacob Blake. The other three you probably haven't. But you should know all of them. And they're four names, they're four lives, and they're four deaths, because all four of them died violently, are a thread that ties through us and ties us together and might help us untie the mess we're in. I've got four amazing people with me today: a pastor, an activist, and two former cops. And we're going to talk about it. I'm Rob Nelson. It's Rob Nelson Live.
Meet Rob Nelson, talk show host.
Because you got the 70s thing going there.
My name's Rob Nelson. I used to have a talk show on Fox, a show on Fox News. But news in America is so produced. I don't care if you think it's left, right, center, fake.
You passed tougher legislation to deal with the paparazzi after what happened with you and your family.
I think it's very important that we focus on rebuilding.
Hey, everybody. I'm Rob Nelson. I'm here in Jacksonville, where I was on Friday. As you can see, it's dark, so I've got my little lights up behind me. Black on black on black. Everything around me is black, except me. I'm white. But today's all about black and white. So I'm going to get to my four awesome guests who are joining me today. And it's good. This is really an exciting show for me. But I want to jump into these four names. You all know who Jacob Blake is. I mean, if you don't know who Jacob Blake is, you're really not paying attention. Jacob Blake's the guy who was shot last week in Kenosha, Wisconsin, not far from where I grew up and actually where I was last week, in the back 7 times by a white police officer. That name you've heard of. That death you've heard of. It's been highly publicized. It's been talked about. You've seen the video. And even if you don't know his name, you know about the shooting and the protests that erupted, the NBA shutting down for a day, Major League, the Milwaukee Brewers not playing their game. You've heard of Jacob Blake the same way you heard of George Floyd. Reginald Boston, you probably haven't heard of. Who was Reginald Boston? Reginald Boston was a young man who was killed in Jacksonville, Florida, less than a year ago in January. Shot by the police. Probably didn't hear about it. Kind of went under the radar. He's part of 16 deaths, 14 shootings in the last 2 weeks ago. The Jacksonville prosecutor's office kind of quietly issued letters to the officers saying you've been cleared. They did it under the radar, quiet. Why quiet? Why not be transparent? Reginald's mom said she basically heard about it after the fact, almost like, hey, by the way, here's a note. The cases aren't closed. The police have just been cleared of doing anything wrong. I don't know if they did something wrong or didn't, but the mom doesn't even find out till sort of the last minute after the fact. You've never heard of Reginald Boston or many of the other people who've been shot legitimately or illegitimately by cops, black, white, brown. You don't hear about them. Morris Bohannon was a cop. He was killed this weekend, St. Louis. St. Louis police officer shot in the head. Shot in the head, going to a call. You don't hear about him. It's a little press note, but he was a vet. He was 3.5 years or something on the force. Black cop, shot in the head, dead. You don't hear about him. You don't hear about him because he's not George Floyd. But his death is still real. His death still counts. And he's a black man. Norman is the last of these. None of you have heard of Norman. If you've watched my show, you might have. Norman died a long time ago. Norman was a 15/16-year-old boy I met 25 years ago. The first words out of Norman's mouth to me were, I hate white people. Norman was big, 6 feet tall, big for his age, tough looking. And he was tough. He was in one of the worst impoverished communities in Washington, D.C. Norman, it was a youth program. They were going to throw him out because Norman just got in fights with everybody. And I was like, Norman's the kid you don't throw out of the program. I was like, keep Norman in. They're like, he's trouble. I mean, he's the kid who needs us the most. They're like, you deal with him. I tried. Literally, Norman ignored me for a day. Only to tell me I hate white people. I hate white people. Well, the short story of Norman is that Norman gave me a chance and stuck with me. And I stuck with Norman. And a year later, Norman took me to school on his Bring Up bring a father or brother to school day. And we walked in that hallway, and I'll never forget Norman's friends kind of laughing and joking and being like, he can't be your brother, man. He's white. And Norman looked at them and said, hey, doesn't matter what color he is. He's my brother. I mean, that was a powerful day. One of the happiest days I can remember. Norman didn't die from a gunshot wound. Although 6 months before he died, he got stabbed in the chest twice for $1 at a subway stop, at a metro stop. Ran a half a mile to a hospital. Tough kid. He survived. He brought a gun into my office one day and said, here, look, this is a gun I have to protect myself before the stabbing. I was like, what do you give me the gun? I'm like, what do you get a gun for? Like, he's like, I need it to protect myself. So you don't need a gun? 2 weeks later, he gets stabbed. A year later, he dies. He dies in a car wreck. And it wasn't your typical, like, just car wreck driving down the street. It was a violent, bad situation. Him with the wrong people in a stolen car, alcohol, driving too fast. He wasn't driving. But Norman's death was just as tragic as Jacob Blake's for a different reason. You know, this past weekend in Chicago, there were 54 shootings, 10 deaths. New York City, 25 shootings, 4 deaths. Jacksonville, right here, 5 or 6 shootings, I think 1 death. But 5 shootings in 7 hours. 7 hours, 5 separate shootings. Denver last week, 3 people died. Philly this weekend, 2 more people died, bringing the number this year to 300, the highest they've had in 17 years. All across America, people are dying of violent gun-related deaths, and most of them are people in impoverished community, and most of them are Black. And a lot of it is Black-on-Black violence. And I know we kind of go this, you know, we hesitate to talk about Black-on-Black violence, but it's as much a part of the problem, because the reality is every single day, our communities, our inner city, I'm white, let's face it. I grew up in a tough neighborhood, but I don't have any idea what it's like to be these kids, to grow up in these neighborhoods, to live in these neighborhoods. What I do know is these communities need support. They are struggling on so many levels with such an economic uneven playing field, with crappy schools and crappy hospitals and terrible tax bases and no real job incentives and too many people going to jail and in prison. Sometimes they deserve to be there. If you want to say it that way, they committed a crime, but the ground they're running on, they're so far behind already. Who are we to judge? What I know is those communities need help, and every single one of those deaths matters. Every single one of those Black lives matters. Not just the ones the cops shot, every single one of them. And if you think it's not your problem, if you think, you know what, it's their problem, or I'm sick of these protests. And by the way, don't get me wrong. I don't want to see any more white people marching around Portland throwing crap. Like, seriously, do something. Do something to make a difference. I don't need your black squares. Go get invested in these communities. But if you think it's not your problem, if you think it doesn't affect you, if you think it's them, it's their world, it's their choices, they should do better, you need to think again. It is all of our problems. Whether you want to say we are only as good as the least of us, the weakest of us, those lowest down on the ladder, or whether you want to say it's out of a love and a humanity or sheer economic self-interest, we're all in this together. We are one country. We may be 2 different races, 2 different colors. We are all one country, one people, and we got one shared vision to get somewhere, and everybody has to get there. Not just some. It's all of our problem. It's every one of your problem. White, Black, upper class, middle class, lower class. But none of us really understand enough, I think. And so I'm here sort of with an idea. I wanted to start like a listening tour, and I decided to call it the Hug It Out Tour, because what I realized is until we start talking, until we share where we're at, just honestly, we're going to say the wrong things. We're going to do the wrong things, but really try to understand where everybody's coming from. We're not going anywhere. So welcome to Rob Nelson Live's Hug It Out Tour. I got 4 awesome people with me today. 2 of them I met in the last 24 hours. 3 of them I met in the last 24 hours. One of them I haven't met except by video or phone, actually. And I'm going to bring them all up together, but I'm going to give you a quick introduction. So Nubian Roberts, they call her the mother of the movement here in Jacksonville, is a Black activist. And I'll tell you how I met her when she comes on, but this woman is strong. She is loud. She is powerful. She is committed, and she has a vision. Pastor Cedric Portis, Third Presbyterian Church, North County, St. Louis, a big church, in a populous part of north of St. Louis, where more people live than in St. Louis, and there's a lot of poverty up there. And then two former police officers, two former Jacksonville sheriff's officers, Robert Relaford, who was a narcotics officer and now has a thing called the Role Models Foundation, and I think we have Sam. I'm not sure if Sam's with us or not, who was a former patrol officer, 25 years on the force. You guys, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for being on the show. Thanks for being part of my listening tour, my Hug It Out tour. I really appreciate y'all coming on. Here they come. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And by the way, Sam Jackson, you know, I know you probably get it all the time. You don't get anything like Sam Jackson, although your buddy who I met the other day looks just like Sam Jackson. It sounds just like him. Kim.
He had those characteristics.
Right? He literally has the Sam Jackson voice. You guys, thank you for being here. So let me just quick set it up with each of you. Nubian, mother of the movement. I just want everyone to know this is where this comes from for me. Nubian, I met Nubian accidentally driving through Jacksonville, trying to go into some more, like, you know, underserved, call them impoverished, whatever you want to call them the hood. I couldn't find people out, and I drove by this Black Lives Matter rally, and I was like, let's go there and let's video and let's live stream. And Nubian was one of the speakers at the rally, and it was mothers who'd lost kids to police violence. And Nubian literally, I'm telling you, I will get some footage of her and I'll post it on Instagram. And I live streamed it, so some of you saw that. She is literally like, if you're a typical like white middle class person, you'd probably be scared of Nubian, because she literally was like, "Don't F with me. You are messing up. You shoot a black kid, you are shooting me, and you don't want me angry." I mean, she was fire and brimstone, and I was like, "Wow, this woman's got passion. She's on fire." And I interviewed her, and as we were going back and forth, and she was telling me, you know, you're only asking those questions because you're white. She was calling me out like left, right, and center. And the guy I'm with here in Jacksonville, who he comes on the show a lot, he's a upper middle class white guy, heart of gold, wants to be part of a solution, leans in and says, "Hey, will you come have dinner with us?" And I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "This woman's going to be like, are you kidding me?" She's like, "Okay." and we had dinner. His wife, a friend, she brought two awesome other female sister activists, and it was like eye-opening for everybody, at least for me. I can't speak for her, but I felt like this is where listening leads to something, to going forward, to doing something. And Sam and Robert, I met in a similar way through a friend of a friend who introduced us to Robert. And, you know, we sat down and had an incredible conversation about race, about being a cop, about being a black cop, about Black Lives Matter. We do have a short clip of that I'll show later. And these are two really awesome, thoughtful guys. And Pastor Portis, I met only on the phone, but Pastor Portis is also like, he's got like a passion and a commitment. And Pastor, I was so impressed talking to you, because I was like, man, this guy should run for office, although he's a pastor. So I don't know how that works, but like he could. It was like, he is not backing down from his vision of what has to happen. And not everything these guys say is easy to hear if you are someone who is A, white, or B, has never really been in or around the world that they may have been around or live around or work in on a daily basis. But it's powerful, and it's the beginning of how we come together. Thank you guys for being here. Let me just throw it out there. You know, you guys heard what I said. You heard what I talked about. I wasn't trying to put Black Lives Matter down as a movement or down, because I've said before, I don't like that it's all focused on police, because I feel like it needs to be about all black lives that are being lost right now. And I think so much of that goes beyond just cops to all kinds of other systemic problems. But that's where I come from. Any one of you jump in. I'll ask you questions. I'll frame it down, but I want to start it with an open end for each of you to kind of weigh in where you feel, what you feel needs to be heard first.
So since I am the lady, I'll go
You're
ahead.
the mother of the movement.
I am the mother of the revolution. Thank you. But that's all good. I'll take mother of the movement. First of all, I want to say greetings to the audience. Very excited to be on this panel with new folks that I have not met before. And I'm excited to, you know, start this conversation and possibly start doing some work in community around anything that we talk about. I want to first say that the rally that we had on Saturday, where I met Rob, was not only in solidarity with everyone throughout the nation about the shooting that happened to Jacob Blake, but it also was about the people's budget that has been given to us in Jacksonville. And the Black community was completely left out of the conversation. So these are conversations we've been having with our mayor for a long time here. And it seems like they want to work with us, but nothing ever gets done. So we just get to a point where we get really tired, we get loud, and we express our disgust. We've been having people get murdered in Jacksonville for a long time now. We've been having these rallies for years. We've had issues amongst folks in our community with violence, and we've also had a lot of police brutality and police murders and a lot of cover-ups and no transparency. We just barely start getting footage from some of JSO, and we just demand that they give us a lot more transparency, because we got a lot of mothers out here and fathers who are hurting because their kids are being stopped for traffic stops and they're not making it home. So, you know, there's a huge issue with over policing in our communities, and just overall a lot of violence. And you know, it would be great to get support from, you know, our mayor and get money in our communities. That's why we do right now, we're running a campaign to defund the police. And
so Nubian, let me interrupt you for a second. So how does defunding the police solve the problem? And I want Robert and Sam to weigh in on that too, because to me, at the end of the day, I get that police are part of the problem, but when I talk to people a lot of times, especially, I feel like that's only one piece of a problem, and police serve a valid function too. Although, again, you guys have talked about the role of police and how they police poor communities rather than serve them. But how does before you guys talk, how does defunding police actually help solve a problem? You're just gonna have more crime.
So, you know, that's kind of a deep rabbit hole to go in.
Okay, take me a little in, not too deep.
But I'm going to kind of just draw you a picture. So education has been being defunded in Jacksonville for a long time over the past few years. And we know that we have what we call the school to prison pipeline. And we're putting our children, our poor children, pretty much in line to eventually see prison or jail at some point of their lives. Just the way that they've set up some things systematically, test score wise, and how things are being run in our private prisons, which is a money-making business. And to me, it's like a form of slavery. Defunding the police for us is, we see the police getting more militarized as the days go on. We have a huge budget that goes to our police officers. Yes, I want people to be able to do their jobs and be safe, but I also see that we're getting a lot of things that we don't necessarily feel that we need in order to basically be served by our police department. It almost feels like we're being set up in position to be at war with our police department.
Okay, Sam or Robert, either one or both of you, go. What do you say to that? You agree, disagree? It's not that. What is it? Where do you go with that?
Well, me and Rob had this conversation earlier, and what we feel is that the public has misinterpreted what defund the police truly mean. I mean, just by the words itself. So I was telling Rob, I think that the initial branding of this campaign of defund the police, it was misbranded. It should have been reallocation, because defunding the police means practically like shutting it down, taking so much of the resources from the police department till they're no longer can be effective. And I don't think that's what it was intended to mean. But I think that they wanted to reallocate some of the funds from programs and that was not being used effectively, and put them back in the hands of those who had the know-how and the skills to effectively carry out those duties. So they just wanted to take some of the burden off the plate of the sheriff's office or a law enforcement agency and put it back into the community who was best served to handle those type of issues.
Okay,
So I
okay.
think
So
that it's a branding issue.
Okay, so Robert, are the police? Do you feel the police, and you're former narcotics, and you work with youth now? Do you think that cops in Jacksonville overall? What's your thoughts on the police force? I know you think there are reforms needed, but like I think we've got a thing where we look at more and more people look at cops bad, protest good, cops bad. Like I know. Just go with that. I'm not even asking the question very well.
Yeah, and I'm big on leadership. And I've always stood by we have a leadership problem. You're only as good as your leader. And with the sheriff's office, before when I was there and even now, there's a lot of lack of leadership. So when you look at the manpower, when you look at the officers and the actions that they carry out, you got to look back at leadership again. And so, and I feel that way also about the unrest in the world today. You got to look at leadership. That's where it starts, and honestly, that's where it ends. So until you can change the leadership, you can't change the manpower, you can't change the officer, you can't change the behavior. That's how I feel about it.
So we're a very binary world right now, which I hate. Are you guys, any of you, and Pastor, I want you to weigh in next, but are you guys anti-cop? Are you anti-cop? Just yes or no. Don't have to explain it, but first, just yes or no. Nubian, are you anti-cop?
I absolutely am not anti-cop. I have police officers in my family in Philadelphia that proudly serve. I just want police officers to have better evaluations. I want to make sure that, the community is basically being made aware of things that are happening. We have mental issues with all sorts of people. We don't know what some of these officers may go through day to day.
Right.
But there are things happening in the community that are just unexplainable, but I definitely am not anti-police. I show respect to police officers as well as military folks.
But we've created an anti-cop mentality right now. I mean, it's out there. You go in the streets of Portland, you got a bunch of white people protesting, hating cops.
Well, I mean, I've said fuck 12. I mean, that's one of those things that when you're protesting, you get heated because there are a lot of killer cops that are out there. That doesn't mean that every single cop is that. But the ones that are, those are the ones that I'm talking to. The ones that threaten me at protests and say they'll break my nose and break my face. Those are the ones that, I don't like you. But that would just mean that if someone wanted to put harm and put you in danger, would you like them? No, you wouldn't. You would be very much cautious and watch your space when you're around. So there are police that, I definitely feel threatened when I see them, and I don't like them, and I don't like what they stand for. But on a whole scale, nothing but respect for police officers that do their job and actually want to be in the community, a part of the community, know the people in the community, and don't abuse their badge.
Okay, Pastor, you've been so patient up there. Let me let you jump in. I'm sure you got a million ideas going right now. So take it where you want from everything you've heard. But please, hit to the core on this because, people don't waste time with whatever. Just hit us hard. Preach at us.
Well, first of all, this idea of the bad cop, this wasn't something that was created. I think it stems from slavery and the slavery taskmaster and catching runaway slaves and things of that nature. One of the things I've been very interested in and looking at is the movement of white people with the Black lives that are being killed now. This is not something new. And then I look at what's going on with the tearing down of Confederate statues. Well, that action is not going to feed any Black families. It's not going to give any jobs to Black folks. It's not going to get anybody out of prison. But what it's doing for the first time is it's forcing white America to cry out. We've been lied to about our past. White America is in crisis right now. And Black America is watching some of this happen, and they're trying to come to grips with an ugly truth that's been withheld from them in their schools, the media, and otherwise. I asked somebody, why was George Floyd the Michael Brown Part 2? Why was that the tipping point? There have been graphic images for hundreds of years. But why did George Floyd garner such outrage? We have countless images in our history books of public lynchings, Black men castrated, hanging from their neck. Why this? What about the graphic image of Emmett Till? Why did that not cause outrage? It's because white America has controlled the historical narrative, and for lack of a better term, they've whitewashed it. And what did cell phones do? It has now exposed the fact that white America has been living a lie. Those Confederate soldiers that they built monuments to, they're not heroes. They were terrorists fighting and killing American soldiers on American soil to preserve keeping to the dehumanizing of African slaves and getting wealthier from free labor. So that is what's going on. And all of these things that's going on around us now are a symptom of coming to grips with what grandmother and granddaddy told me. What I learned in my history books is not our truth. And until we face that truth, we're going to continue to have people lives snuffed out. We're going to have resources continue to be pulled from the Black community, and we're going to continue to suffer.
Right. And I'm not gonna argue, Pastor, that there isn't a massive, I've said for a long time, I said for years, there's a massive economic inequality that has existed. I think it's structural. You might argue it's systemic and racist. I think some of it was. I don't know if it is as much anymore from race as it is from structural imbalances that got put in place. But certainly even up to the 50s and 60s and 70s with housing, it was race-based at a certain level to create and isolate. Certainly the crime bill of 94, the double sentencing standards, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, when you say what you said, I see a whole lot of white people going, man, he's saying reparations. He's saying I didn't have anything to do with slaves. And truthfully, I'd say we built a country on racism. Absolutely. I mean, I don't know how many countries in the world weren't built on racism.
Yeah, you call it.
We're all standing on that right now. Even you and I and, LeBron James, President Obama, everyone's standing on that country that was built on racism. We can't unbuild that. We can only move forward toward progress.
Yeah. You call it racism, but I want to call it what it is. You built this country on the backs of African slaves. That free labor took this country from third world to first world in less than 200 years, and that's never been done in the history of mankind. And this was what the Civil War was about, fighting to keep this free labor. So I find it ironic when I talk to a lot of white people and they say things like, I worked all my life and pulled myself up by my bootstraps. Well, it was black backs that made those boots that you have.
Right.
You never dropped off boots in the Black community. We can't pull ourselves up by boots that don't exist.
Yep. I think that's a great point. I want to interrupt you there. I really want everyone to think about that because I think it's one of the most, and it's come up a few times. It's when people say pull yourself up by the bootstraps, I always think that's easy to say if you have bootstraps. If you don't have
boots,
or even laces.
Give me the boots. and here's the thing: once we get the boots, then what happens? Tulsa, Black Wall Street happened.
Right.
You can't have nice boots as white people, or we will burn them down.
Let me interrupt you for a second. A lot of people don't know what that was, even though they pretend they know what Juneteenth was. A lot of white people be like, I know what Juneteenth is. Actually, a lot of black people might not know. But for those of you who don't know, it's Greenwood, I believe, right? Greenwood but it's outside of Tulsa. It was a neighborhood in Tulsa that was basically super prosperous, black community, doing great, and they literally burned it to the ground. Was it 80 years ago?
Yeah, over 200 people died.
Yeah, burned it to the ground, and that was all about getting rid of that progress. So I agree with you.
For living the American dream.
And I'm just saying, how do we start moving forward? You guys jump in. Don't feel like you gotta wait. We can all.
Let's not confuse people because you said Juneteenth. That's something separate than burning down Wall Street. Juneteenth is like a liberation day from being liberated as slaves.
Yes.
The Wall Street thing was. Once we were liberated from slavery, we decided to create our own community.
Yes. Amen.
And they saw that we were flourishing, and a story was made up about some white woman being raped. Same scenario as Emmett Till.
Right.
Same thing as probably the Me Too movement on some level. So I don't want to offend anybody because rape does exist. But we've had a lot of white women in history basically point the finger at black men and create a slaughter of black men being murdered in the street behind one woman. So that's what happened in Tulsa, and it was destroyed. Never even thought about. There was really not a lot of press on it. and it doesn't seem to be talked about now. Most young people don't even know what
Right.
happened.
Yeah.
I agree with you. And
Yeah.
thanks for correcting me on the Juneteenth thing. But remember, and I mixed them up because I'm all excited. But, you know, that's when it kind of started getting talked about, because I think Trump was going there to Tulsa on Juneteenth, right? And crossed over that. But either way, my point would be, I don't think most people, white or black, are really aware of these parts of our history. And maybe that's to Cedric, to Pastor, to your point, that like, we don't know. But what I think people do know is they sense there's an inequality, but we focus so much on, in my opinion, on the police brutality that I feel like we lose sight of the real killing and death to Black America isn't just from police officers. That's this much.
Rob, the ignorance was calculated. This didn't just come about. The history wasn't burned. It's right there in plain sight. And let me tell you this. This is a quote that I heard. The one who controls the past controls the future. If I control what the truth is, then I navigate the path to the path to the future. So therefore, our history has been robbed from both white and Black America. Slavery affected the whole country.
Yeah.
And white America needs to come to grips with how slavery affected them, both positively and negatively. One of the things about the African culture is we're big on stories. Tell the story, tell the story, tell the story. The problem is when white America, especially after the Civil War, they changed the narrative. And this is why we have monuments of Confederate soldiers who by definition were terrorists.
Mm-hmm.
So when you face the truth of your past, then we can chart a new path forward. But until then, we're going to keep going around in circles.
Right. Hey, Robert, you look like you want to get in on this. By the way, just as one of you have something playing open in the background that's creating that feedback, it might be you, Robert. I don't know if
honestly, I think it's me, and I'm trying to fix it.
Okay, we'll mute you when you're not talking. But go ahead. You look like you wanted to say something.
Well, yeah, I just want to comment when you were talking about, white people and just don't know. You have to want to know in order to know.
You got to be intentional. Amen.
Hands down. Because even when we go back to law enforcement and I talk about these shootings, and when they keep saying we need more training, I say, hey, as a Black officer, I got the same training that white officer has. You just got to want to use that training. But if you don't want to use that training, you want to do what you want to do, then that's what we got going on.
Mm-hmm.
I don't buy that whole don't know. That's a good excuse, but it's not real.
Right.
So it's not a don't know. It's a I don't have to know. My whole life, when I graduated from college, what I've had to be is bicultural. I know more about your culture, the white culture, than some white people do because I have to. Mm-hmm. And those Black people who have come up that ladder has been able to code switch and know about the culture. When white people are just amazed at what I go through as a Black man, why? It is because you've never had to know our culture to survive.
Right. I hear that actually. It's a thing I've heard before, Pastor. The idea that like Black people understand white people culture because they were historically have always been a part of it. Even not that long before, a friend of mine, Jody Armour, who's a professor at USC, at law school, diversity studies, really, amazing story. His father, 30 years in prison for a tiny crime, learned to read, got himself out. Jody's an amazing, personality. And he said, this story of this woman who said she was walking with her kids, white woman and her little kids, saw a Black woman and her little kid, and the little kid went, "Look, mommy, a baby nanny." And it was like that idea that like, that's how so many Black people understood white people, by being part of our world, whether they wanted to or not. White people have no shared experience back the other way. I think that's what you're saying, right?
One of the things you got to remember is our being bicultural. If that wasn't the case, it could mean our death. Back when you couldn't look a white man in the eye or you will be killed.
Right.
So all of these little nuances of what we do to navigate in and out of the white culture, it's for survival.
Yeah.
That we have to teach our black boys what to do when pulled over by a police officer. And I'm just going to put this out there right now. This whole idea about a retort to Black Lives Matter as Blue Lives Matter. I serve on the Moline Acres Police Department as their police chaplain. There is no such thing as a blue life. When I'm pulled over, it's a black man until I pull my badge out. So it's different. When we take
Robert,
off, there's no correlation between black lives and blue lives. There's no such thing as a blue life. It's something different, and don't confuse it. I'm not saying that the lives of police officers don't matter, but we're not talking apples to apples here.
Sam, Robert, you guys are black men and you're police officers, retired, whatever. However, both of you look like you could be working for another 15 years. So, how do you see that as individuals and as, black men and as black police officers?
Sam, you want that one?
Sam's audio. We can't hear you, Sam.
Okay. We
can't hear you, Sam. Go ahead, Robert.
Okay. It's a culture when they talk about this Blue Lives Matter. That's the culture of policing, because it's basically it's a fraternity, and they're going to protect theirs at any cost, right, wrong, or indifferent. That's just the way it is. I was a part of it. Sam was a part of it. But we were able to separate ourselves from it, because what's been happening over and over again has been happening to people that look like us. Mm-hmm. So we were willing to break that code. I left law enforcement for various reasons that dealt with some of the things that were going on I just didn't agree with. And Sam and I have had this conversation before, because he asked me, Rob, why did you leave? Well, I didn't leave because I was forced away. I left because I wanted to leave, because I could not continue to deal with some of the things that were going on. I wasn't with that, if I can say it like that.
So I agree what you're saying and talking about that fraternity and protecting your own. Guess what? The black culture is a fraternity in and of itself. And what we're crying out is, where is our protection?
Exactly.
Right.
And another thing I'd like to say, my thoughts are, when you go into the police force, you are choosing a profession.
That's right.
You know that you're going to be high risk, and you know that there is a chance that you may die in the line of duty. Now, I didn't choose to be black. My dad's Cuban. I could have been bright skin like you, my friend Rob, but I'm not. I'm dark, melanated. And with that comes more than you'll ever be able to imagine, unless you were able to walk in my skin. Mm-hmm. So those two things should never be compared. And in fact, after the Black Lives Matter movement started, the Blue Lives Matter movement whatever it was already in the fraternity, it became more of a thing to insult us and say that blue lives were more important than black lives. So when you say that right off the back, you're telling us that you don't care about black lives, because whatever police do and whatever, force they take, it's cool with you because their lives matter. We can't think like that. We can't move like that.
I think a lot. I only disagree with one part of that. I'm sure some of it is the backlash is sort of a finger to the Black Lives Matter, a middle finger to the Black Lives Matter. But I think a lot of white people don't understand what you guys are talking about. I think it sounds crazy, but it takes people sometimes a while. Maybe it's because they're white and what you said, they haven't had to experience it. They don't understand. They're like, well, wait a minute. Why are you saying this life matters and the cop who gets shot doesn't? And nobody's saying that, by the way. Well, some people are, but most people aren't saying it. And you put it well. It's not that cops' lives don't matter, but the point was black lives have not been treated the same. So let's make black lives matter. And I don't know why that's hard for people to get. Go ahead, Pastor.
So when we're talking about this idea of Black Lives Matter, this is something that I hear a retort. Well, why do black people keep killing one another? Well, here's the thing. If Pookie kills Ron, we know Pookie's going to jail. But if the cop kills Ron and gets off, that's the problem. There's not the policing has become hunting. And that's the struggle in the community. We're not saying that our lives matter. And we want to know, when is it going to stop being open season on the African-American male?
Absolutely.
Right. Look, I get it. And I think, and you guys everybody feel free to chime in. Don't wait for me to ask you. I think look, color counts, right? It shouldn't, color may define us in some ways. I don't think it should determine us. It shouldn't determine what happens to us or where we go. And too often it does. If I asked every one of you, and I might have asked you guys I might have asked you, Sam and Robert, but I want you each to answer, which would you rather be, white or black, and driving in a car?
White.
Sam?
White man driving.
Sam? White. We can't hear you, Sam.
White.
White.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
that's obviously that's a rhetorical question.
It is, but I'm making the point because not one of you is going to say black, and I challenge any white person to say black. They won't. They'd be lying. That says something.
With harassment and just regular travel, and it happens too often to us. I mean, by all means, being black is an amazing thing because we do things in a way that most cultures could never even imagine. We have something very dynamic about us all. That's why we dominate in sports.
Yeah, we built this country
in a lot of things. And for us to have for us to have all of the obstacles and struggle that we've had as a culture, I think we're doing pretty good for ourselves. But 100%, y'all can, agree or whatever with me. We feel the knee on our neck as a people, and we constantly are being smacked in the face with violence. And it's like you're taunting us. Y'all not going to do nothing. We'll kill them right on camera, right in front of you. All four of us will stand on this one man. It's incredibly disrespectful to think that we're not going to get sick and tired of it. And we're going to speak after you're taking taxes from us. We're constantly, fighting for our communities just to thrive. I live in a community where there's not even a freaking restaurant. It's a food desert.
Right. And I want to focus a little on that in a second but I guess what I'm saying is I feel like in some ways the George Floyd thing, look, no one's going to defend what happened to George Floyd. And it was clearly racist. And I actually think the cop, I think he had a thing with not just with black people, but with him personally from the club. There's no question he was a racist. But I don't think most cops are racist. And I think we've now created this binary thing. And I'm not saying there isn't systemic racism, and you guys have talked about that. But I think we look at a shooting of a black person and we automatically go, it's racist. Take a second, just if you will. I want to play this video from talking to you guys yesterday. It's just a 1-minute video, and then you guys can comment on it. Bruce, can we play the video of I think it's called Cops. So as cops, we'd handle it different. But none of you thought it was because the guy was black and the cop was white.
I don't think it was a racial shooting. I think it was a coward shooting. I think it was a being scared and to go hands on. I don't think that was a racial shooting.
I think it was overzealous.
Racist?
I don't think it was racist.
As law enforcement officers, we have the ability to allow a suspect or a citizen to enough rope to where we can either make an arrest, engage him in physical confrontation, or kill him.
And we use the use of force. We put our hands on people. We use our pepper spray. We used our baton. We used our taser.
And you refuse to lose.
Refuse to lose.
Break away from me. I have to go back and engage him again.
So for you, it's a little. You're also like a Mr. Tough guy here. You did narcotics, like you're in the hardcore, like you've shot people. I think a lot of these cops are just really unequipped or scared. I don't know.
Every law enforcement officer, when he chooses this profession, it's understood that you're going to encounter danger on a daily basis. Right. But again, that's that fear as an officer you should have. But you cannot go out there every day with a gun and be scared.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you are, you're going to take the life of somebody that you are scared of. And some of these officers are scared of black men.
So I think, go ahead and jump in. Clearly, people are.
I'm going to say something, definitely. I'm going to say 8 minutes and 46 seconds. That's how long they had their knee on his neck. I dare any of you to get on your knee for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. It takes a lot of endurance to do that. That had to be 100% hate driven to do that.
Yep. But they're talking about.
What were y'all scared of? It was 4 of you on one person.
But they're talking about Jacob Blake. No one's arguing with George Floyd. You guys were talking about Jacob Blake, and I think now whenever we see a shooting, we assume it's racist.
I was fired up about that one. I thought we were still talking about George Floyd.
No, sorry. Let me be clear.
Let
me be clear to the audience. Wait, 1 second. Let me be clear to the audience. Those guys were not talking about George Floyd. So don't anybody think they were saying that wasn't racist. They were talking about the Jacob Blake shooting in Kenosha, just so we're clear.
Right.
So the whole idea of fear, let's talk about that for a minute. Because of white America's refusal to learn about the Black culture, it creates an inherent fear. So as soon as you see a Black face, you clutch your purse, grab your gun first, because if Blake was a white person, he would still be alive. You got 17-year-olds walking down the street with an assault rifle right by the police and not even bat an eye. If that was a Black person, he would be 10 pounds lighter because of the bullets in him. So this whole "I don't need to learn your culture" is going to continue to be open season on Black people, because I'm shooting first, asking questions later. It's pow, then halt.
Robert?
Yeah, and I want to open up this other can of worms of when I talked the other day about, should we be tracking some of these police shootings as serial in nature? Because, in my opinion, when you start looking over the last 5 years and the pattern of the shootings, I think there could possibly be something there that needs to be looked at. Just because they're happening in this city or that city, and these officers aren't together at the time, is there a culture out there that is serial in nature that we need to start looking at?
And do you think there is? And explain that. A culture meaning a culture of like, we want to get Black people, or is it just a culture of abuse, a culture of violent, authority? I have a gun and a badge. I'll F with anyone I want.
Well, again, looking at the history of what's been going on, and I'm just using the last 5 years, and then I'm looking at the leadership again that we have and how things have turned of late. I think they feel empowered now to act in a way that they've always kind of thought about doing, and they've had a chance to get some of that frustration out, if I could say that.
All right, let me, and I want to move to another topic in a second, but we've had a bunch of comments from users, and I just want to take at least one question. So anyone you can jump in on this. Think for yourself at Reddit says, do you guys think that using terms like Black culture and white culture is actually creating more social segregation? I have a feeling I know what.
No, it's just calling it what it is. It's just calling it what it is. You have a Black culture, you have a white culture. It's been created like that since we came here on the boat.
Is there anything wrong with it though? Like, what's wrong with you guys celebrate aspects of Black culture the same way Italians celebrate that? What's wrong with that?
I don't think it's not creating more separatists. It hopefully is creating a flag here to say, hey, I need to know more about this culture before I automatically assume that they're violent and they're going to kill me or something.
Right. Somebody mute your Robert. Mute your mic. Keep going, Cedric, Pastor. I think Robert's mic is back, giving us back feed.
And furthermore, we got to talk about the community. When we talk, let's circle back around to this whole thing about defund the police.
Yeah.
When you look at the inner city or the poverty-stricken or the Black community, look at how much goes into policing budget versus the school budget. And it's very disproportionate. We spend millions into policing, and we're continuing to pull money out of the school district. I want you to, you don't have to. When I was in high school, I read a book called Lord of the Flies. It was about some British teenagers that were stranded, and they didn't have any resources.
Right.
Then what happened is they immediately turned violent, and one of them killed another one. So you extrapolate all of these resources from the Black community and you say, figure it out. Where do we get the guns? There's not a gun store within 20 miles of my house, but the community's full of guns. We don't have any poppy fields. Why all the drugs? Come on, white people.
Well, we know white America is never going to really admit to, unless we just look at a documentary. We'll never have a really sit down talk about what happened in the 80s with the drugs being flooded into our communities. But, you know, we're always looked at like we should be doing more. But it's like we still haven't even talked about reparations. Like that's a real conversation that needs to be had. I mean, the gap between the wealth of white America and Black America it's insane. You're invested in the same country. I mean, any 46-year-old white woman, her whole life is going to be a whole different story than mine most of the time. She's probably going to marry into wealth at some point. And it's unfortunate that we can't have real conversations. Nobody wants to admit.
Well, we can. We can. That's my thing. I mean, that's why I'm doing this, right? I think we have to start having real conversations. I'm not saying they're going to be easy. And look, to be honest, you know, I think as much as everything you guys say is valid, and you know, someone can argue, dispute whether they agree, disagree, parts of it, but you can't argue with some of the fundamentals. You just be arguing against the facts. But at the end of the day, we have to find a way to bring everyone together. And the sad truth is, and I was going to say this earlier, what you were saying, Pastor, is but white people still have a lot of power. And the truth is, I mean, that's what bothers me about these protests. So many people out there protesting because it's easy. They're not Rosa Parks. They're not taking any risks. They're getting rewarded. They can take off work. When it comes to sacrifice, a whole lot of white people are going to be like, hey, I ain't giving up my job. I ain't giving up anything real. But that's what it's going to take to make the kinds of investments, the kinds of change that you're talking about, Nubian. It's going to take commitment from everybody.
We talk about this idea of reparations, and I laugh at that sometimes, because if you review your history, there was some reparations paid after slavery. You know how? They gave some of the slave owners millions of dollars for property loss.
Yep.
You know that? Nobody knows that. They gave families that suffered from World War II $20,000 a family. We're still waiting on our check from 200 and some years of slavery. But this is what's going to be needed in our community: an influx of resources, cash resources, livable wage jobs. Then you will see the crime decrease. I'm pretty sure if that little group from Lord of the Flies would have landed in a modern day Jamaica, no one would have gotten killed, because there's enough resources to go around. If all of a sudden resources was pulled from the white community, I'm telling you what, it would be more white on white crime than you've ever seen before.
Hey, I agree. Listen, I agree with the resource issue. I'm saying making that change, making that allocation is where I'm saying where, to me, it's really at. And look, I don't pretend to have all the answers, right? Like, I'm the first to admit, like, I don't know. You said it earlier, Nubian. I can't know what it's like to be a Black woman or a Black man, or even, you know, I don't even know what it's like. I lived in a rough neighborhood as a kid. I didn't live literally in a totally impoverished community. Like, so I can't know, but I can know that we have to come together and find solutions, and everyone's got to take a stake in that investment. And I'm fine. You want to say reparations, Pastor? What difference does it make if you give? It's like the stimulus check. Everybody got $1,000. Like, who cares? Like, it ain't what we need. Massive change.
No, if you give 1,000,
like, we literally need more. We need funding in our historic communities. We need land to be given to folks to create, resources for folks to be able to have farms and eat. We need opportunities that are given specifically to Black folks. What happened to Black farmers? Why are Black farmers not a thing anymore? It's because the government found a way to once again cheat us out of our land, out of our value. They talk people out of being farmers, and right now you got people that are coming out of prison that were in jail because of cannabis, marijuana, and now those same people can't even get into the marijuana industry after you've taken years off of their lives. Like, these are just things that simply could be looked, given to the Black community as a way for us to economically start building our communities up. Like me, myself, I'm invested in childbirth, natural childbirth for our communities. There are so many Black women that are being murdered when they go in to have their babies that I can't turn a blind eye to that. So me, myself, I'm working on my doulaship and then also teaching other young Black women to be doulas, because this is what our ancestors did. They didn't go to hospitals. They had their babies in the cotton fields sometimes right back to work.
And I agree with that. And I'm trying to get us to, and by the way, we have so much going on, so many people jumping in here. And I just want to take a second because this audience is so interactive. A lot of people, one person saying, hey, you can pretend to Black. You don't have to want to like the fact that this country was built on the backs of Blacks, but it was. Doesn't change anything. Somebody else saying, look at Asheville, North Carolina. I don't know what he's referring to. Reparations plans moving in the right directions. One of you might know about that. Somebody else said, what about people who say, point to figures like Beyonce, Oprah, Obama, and say, see? And I've said that before. I keep saying, I don't think Obama's a token. He was the most powerful man in the free world for 8 years. That's not insignificant. That doesn't change the systemic problems, but that's meaningful, right?
You can't put everything on Obama. I mean,
no, I don't mean that. I'm just saying it is.
Congress had a lot to do with that. We don't even want to talk about that because he didn't do nothing for the Black community.
No, excellent. Okay, I'm not saying that. I'm saying does Black achievement? You guys would acknowledge Black achievement counts, right? It doesn't change this problem. It doesn't change the massive economic inequality, but Oprah's not a token Black woman. She's one of the richest women in the world. She's a powerful force that's influenced millions of lives. That's meaningful, right? Or no? Am I wrong?
It's meaningful, but I mean, that's just like starting to talk about, I can't even remember the lady's name now.
No, so you don't think or do think that? Because a lot of
Martha Stewart. Like, that's like you can't like Oprah is one person. Okay. Tyler Perry is one person. We got tons of Martha Stewarts and Rachel Ray. Let's not put it on their backs.
No, and I'm not trying to put on their backs. I'm trying to ask you this. I'm not trying to put on their backs. I'm trying to say sometimes I feel like we diminish, like there's nothing wrong with acknowledging that there may be massive economic structural inequalities that have to be dealt with, but there has been enormous success for individuals in a meaningful way, having the most wealthy, powerful, the most famous athletes. That's not insignificant, is it? Or is it to you? Yeah, go ahead, Pastor.
Here's the idea. On the plantation, some were fortunate enough to get in the house.
Right.
That doesn't mean that you stop being a slave.
You see, but come on, LeBron James isn't. Really LeBron James house? Come on, you're not.
But he's still talking about his son, and he's scared for his son and his interaction. You got to pull out the "I'm the LeBron son" card or something like that. No, I'm not discounting some of our African Americans who have been able to come up and gain some wealth. But the fact of the matter is, that's a grain of sand versus a whole beach when we're talking about the generational wealth of the white community versus the Black community. It doesn't even compare, even with all of LeBron's money and Oprah money and Bob Johnson's money put together.
So and I love that you hit it on the generational wealth, because that's a great way for people to think of it. It is a generational wealth gap that is so huge. And there are massive economic inequalities, structural, infrastructural, economic, incentive-based in inner city, in impoverished communities, and in a lot of Black communities. So that's the structural core. We're running out of time, and I want to have you guys all be part of this town hall that we're doing. But what's the simplest, as if you could put it in a simple thing? First of all, thank you guys for being part of this conversation. I appreciate it. I really appreciate your, openness. And look, I don't know. I don't have half the answers. I just want ask a lot of questions, and I might push back and whatever, and so for me, I'm not always, I'm going to say things that may not always make sense, but I'm just saying what I think from my heart and trying to understand. But what's the next step? I mean, for me, the next step starting to at least create this dialogue to try to get somewhere, because it does take everyone, right? You can't do this you can't do this if white people aren't willing to be part of the solution and not just protest. Or that's my thought.
Well,
yeah. Go ahead, take a second.
I think the way we start is at the polls. We've got to vote.
Right.
because the fact of the matter is, over, the last 3.5 years of Trump, he's appointed what, 198 judges, and these are people that we're going to have to deal with that mentality for decades to come. We have got to get to the polls and vote some people that actually have our best interests.
What about voting? What about, before the two of you go, I'm not going to go on the Trump Biden thing, because I think I get in this thing and I'm just like, literally neither one's going to solve this problem.
No.
What about voting new people in, though? What about voting like the Nubians, like, or you, Pastor, or maybe even Robert, like putting citizen people in power? You guys could do it. You got the community votes.
Well,
I'd vote for all three of you. I'm not in your district, but
Well, I have been with my organization working on a couple of different folks campaigns that actually a few of them won. Tracy Davis was reelected. So that is something that I definitely am involved in. I myself go to Tallahassee and work with legislators to pass bills to protect formerly incarcerated women and incarcerated women while they're locked up, just on some basic human rights.
So would you run? I'm pushing you just because we're out of time. Would you run for office?
Absolutely would run for an office in Duval County if need be. I personally would like to work for a candidate because, like I said, I'm working on
Be the candidate. Be the candidate. How about you, Robert? Would you run? Robert, would you run?
No, I told you I left law enforcement because I wasn't politically correct. I couldn't play the game, and you have to play the game to be.
No, you don't have to, Robert.
That's what we need.
You don't have to play the game.
Who won't play the game to run. That's what Trump did. You got to be Trump on the other side.
That's the president. On a local level, you make it happen. Like small community by community.
And I agree, but you can run. Look, city councils have power. You talk about the mayor, get a new mayor in Jacksonville. How about you, Pastor?
Nubian for mayor at Jax Beach.
Okay, go run for mayor at Jax Beach. We'll start a campaign behind you. Seriously. Pastor, did you ever do it?
Not sure. My calling is here in the church and in the community for right now. But if the Lord puts that on my heart, anything is possible.
But
I'm putting out a prayer to what's that, Robert?
I said I vote for the pastor if he did.
Yeah, and by the way, we all going to make a prayer to the Lord then to give you a little message that maybe you should be like, seriously, we need people like all three.
So that means you ain't gonna vote for me, Robert. You didn't think I caught that?
You guys are different.
Are we about to have another conversation?
You're already in.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, you can vote for both because they're in two different places. So don't worry.
I might be Robert for protection. Okay, the way that I'm going.
You're both his favorites. You guys, thank you so much for being part of this. I appreciate it. Look, it's not always easy, but I really think we have this conversation. Will you all be part of the town hall that I'm trying to put together, right? You all said you would anyway, right?
Oh, sure.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We make progress.
Yeah,
we have to keep. See, here's the thing: we got to keep getting the message out because white people, you don't learn about black people on Google.
No, and you shouldn't
I'm not
Google
teaching any white people, black people classes. But if you like to connect with me, please feel free to reach out to me by email. And if you'd like to donate to Melanin Mama's Birthing Center, the producer's going to run the Cash App.
Yeah,
so
he did, right, exactly. And Robert has a foundation as well, which you can support. And he's doing some cool stuff. I know we don't have time to get into it, but you're doing a thing, Shoot Buckets, not each other, which I love. I want to talk more. We didn't get to a lot of
Pastor, you got 2 votes.
And there you go. I vote for him also. And the pastor has a church.
That's my wife.
Okay, that is your wife. All right, she better vote for you. We'll get more votes. You guys, listen, I'd love to have you all back on, but we're going to figure this town hall out because this conversation is where it starts. Hey, Bruce, thanks for running. Bruce, our producer, thanks for running a great show for us, Bruce. He's going to put himself in because he's got that supersonic setting behind him.
Thank you, Bruce.
We're going to be streaming this whole thing in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. We're figuring out the dates from Jacksonville, and we're going to have I won't listen. You guys help me get this message out, right? If enough people come together, I think we can get a viral message out there where people start listening. Yeah? You guys on board?
Yes, I'm definitely on board.
Sure.
I'm definitely on board because we have to continue to get this message out.
Yeah, we do. And dialogue, right?
Yes.
And by the way, just for everybody out there, last thought. I think a lot of sorry, I'm getting so wound up. I'm probably yelling at the mic. White people are often scared of black people, and they're often scared of black people with strong opinions, right? Who don't say what they want to hear. You start saying stuff like the pastor saying, people are like, oh, like, I'm scared. What would the simple, we're so out of time, but the simple thing, because I think people shouldn't be scared of it. I think they should just be like, hey, bring it on. Let me hear it. And I may agree, I may disagree. You're not hating on them by sharing that message. You're just impassioned, right? So to all the scared people out there who are scared to hear what you guys say, what would you say to them other than F you, like something nice you would say to them to make them less scared?
We would never say F you to them, but there's a certain thing in our hood. People that talk, right, usually are not the ones that like lay hands the first.
Right.
The ones that are silent are the ones you need to really, really watch.
Right.
Because if they be saying nothing and they taking a bunch of your mess, be real careful. But people that want to have conversations with you usually want to understand your side, and they're willing to be open. You know, like I always feel like there's nothing more compassionate and more open than the Black women that I know. They always are very open to conversations. Now, we getting tired of teaching white people how to behave and what's appropriate. So if you could spare us that expense, then we can have a conversation.
I don't know. So all I know is my thing would be, I wish every white person out there I know so many people who say, I'm afraid to even ask, to say, I just am saying, seriously, would it just walk up to a Black person and say, talk to me. I want to have a conversation. I don't think they're not going to shoot you. That's for sure. I mean, not any more than,
Well, it depends on what side of the hood you're in.
Some neighborhoods, but even there, you might be better off.
But the thing is, you have to be intentional about it.
Yeah,
most of the white culture aren't intentional because they don't have to be. They don't have.
Maybe I would say we do have to be right now.
Well,
we are at a time in history where we have to be intentional about it.
Hopefully that's the case. Hopefully that's the case, and that's what I was talking about. This tipping point that we're at right now, and you looking back on your revisionist history and say, I've been lied to.
Right. Yeah. All right, you guys. Thanks so much for being on the show with me. I really appreciate it.
Me, Rob.
Yeah, you're welcome, you guys. Okay. Hey, everybody for watching. Thanks for watching. It's Rob Nelson Live. We're back in LA next week, but then we're going to be back in Jacksonville in the next couple of weeks, and we really are putting together this big town hall where I want everyone, and virtual. It's virtual just because we're in Jacksonville. Ideas to start a conversation that leads to actual change at the community level and brings out all the voices in, and let it go viral, let it go virtual, and let everybody see that the more transparent and honest we are, even when it's hard, the more progress we're going to make, the more better chance we have. We can no longer, as the pastor said, afford to be unintentional. It's time for everybody to step up to the plate and face the hard truths and make, kind of hold hands, hug it out, and actually make some real changes. I'm Rob Nelson. It's Rob Nelson Live. Thanks for watching.